I used to run kids over by the busload on the lacrosse field. To this day, I've never had more fun being high than I did playing lacrosse. I wasn't getting high every day back then. It was mainly just on game days or sometimes on the weekend, depending on who I was hanging out with. So when I did get high, I'd get super high. The senior parking lot actually overlooked the lacrosse field, so it made sense to hang out there, and it was kind of tucked back in the corner, so it was the perfect place to puff a bowl before the game. We'd just get our tunes going, some good pump-up music, then spark the green. Now you might think that playing sports high would be a no-go. I'm here to tell you that for me it was a 100% positive experience. As far as that goes, I didn't have much of a choice since I joined the lacrosse team exclusively for the weed, and a pregame toke was the usual MO. You see, I had just recently discovered the wonders of my beloved sacrament and wanted more. None of my friends smoked, different crowd. There were some skaters I knew who smoked, but I had no interest in learning to skate. That asphalt looked pretty damn hard. The other guys I knew who smoked were on the lacrosse team, which had a reputation for being a hard partying crowd. My understanding is that it's pretty much like that in most lacrosse programs. Even our coaching staff liked to rage. There was actually a team trip once where they ended up getting in trouble for it. They had collected money for hotels from the kids and then switched to a cheaper motel at the last minute, used the extra money on beer. It just so happened that that night a couple of the players got a bit rowdy and we got a noise violation called on us. When the cops showed up, the coaches were too trash to talk to them. They had to send the team captain out to handle it. I never got drunk before playing though, just high. I'd usually just get really dialed in and intensely into the game, and I played with a ton of confidence, which meant my natural aggression got the chance to come through. I mean, I'm not too aggressive in my day-to-day life, but when it comes to sports, I don't have any trouble going for it. And on the lacrosse field, I used to go for it with both barrels blasting. Like on more than one occasion, I literally took out entire groups of opposing players like a damn Scud missile. I tried to get a couple on each pass through the scrum. Like it happened more than once that I hit one guy who then slammed into a teammate, ending with them both on the ground. I was a brute. Or sometimes I'd just stop and stand directly over the ball and wait. Then I'd just keep my head on a swivel like I was in a street fight and try to smash anyone that came close. This was not a conventional tactic. Most guys would pick up the ball and run. I wasn't big on my ball skills though. Like I could catch and throw decently if I was standing still and not under pressure. But anything more than that was beyond me. Even a simple thing like scooping the ball can be pretty damn difficult when you're trying to do it while running full speed and there's someone right behind you whacking you in the arm with a stick. I learned my lesson early on about not trying to scoop the ball. In one game I closed out on a guy near midfield and knocked the ball loose with my standard Donkey Kong slap check. I then knocked him out of bounds. So far, everything according to plan. Then when I looked up, I saw that there was no one around me. The ball had been in the process of being cleared and everyone else was either far away or had been caught running in the other direction. It was just me and the ball in the open field. Fuck it, I thought. I can do this. I tried to scoop the ball, only managed to push it away from me. Tried again, pushed it away again. It was like this slapstick routine where the guy is trying to grab his hat and keeps on kicking it. I was like a damn field hockey player. I was running along the midfield line, hunched over, pushing the ball along in front of me. A few opposing players had the balls to take a shot at me. They must have thought this was their big chance. I was bent over and vulnerable, eyes on the ground. No one dared come at me head on, but they were brave enough to come in at a slant. They bounced off like ping pong balls. I hardly felt them. Didn't break my stride. I was a man among boys. A man who pushed the ball all the way across the field until it went out of bounds on the far sideline. This was embarrassing to say the least, hence the strategy of just kicking ass so everyone else could clean up the loose balls. That was up to my teammates. Whenever our team got the ball on the defensive end, I'd haul ass to the sideline and the coach would sub in a speedy midfielder to help with clearing the ball. Then as soon as we got it downfield, I'd be back in. I probably should have been embarrassed that even after 3 years I never learned to handle the ball properly, but I didn't really give a shit. I was just there to wreck kids. And I was an equal opportunity dozer. One team we played had a girl on the team. She was small too, like 5 feet or so. One of those girls that looks like she's in middle school up until she hits college. Must have weighed about 90 pounds. I ran her over without a moment's hesitation. I mean, I didn't hit her particularly hard, and I certainly didn't hit her because she was a girl. I hit her because she was a lacrosse player, which I figure is how she wanted it. Because after the game, when we went down the line shaking hands, she gave me a very sweet smile. I expect she got some street cred for how she shook off that walloping, because even though I didn't try to clean her clock, even hitting her marginally sent her flying. Like I think she was horizontal for a moment in the air. But she got up like a boss and ran right back into the mix. My guess is she must have had some older brothers who got her share of roughhousing. One time I cracked a kid so hard that he got up and took a swing at me with his stick, tried to whack me right in the head. The ref was running the other way and didn't see this, which definitely would have been cause for ejection. So I let the dude's featherweight titanium shaft bounce off my helmet and then smashed him again. Helmet to helmet, both fists in his chest, this time with bad intentions. Titanium was for wimps, and that was another thing about my style of lacrosse. Instead of carrying a super lightweight titanium shaft like all of my teammates, I opted for a solid oak pole. This caused a huge deficiency in stick speed, made it harder to throw and catch, wore you out faster, and just generally made you look like you had showed up for practice in your church clothes. The one advantage was that when I threw a slap check, it had a hell of a thump behind it. You see, the rules in lacrosse forbid you from intentionally attacking your opponent with your stick, for obvious reasons. But when he has the ball, you can try to make him drop it by throwing checks at his stick or at his hands. There were all manner of fancy finesse checks, poke checks and wraparound checks and flashy over-the-head checks. For me, it was one thing and one thing only. Slap check. All day and all night. Imagine wearing gloves made of quarter-inch thick foam. They had to be thin for maneuverability, and then having a 200-pound man whack you on the knuckles with an oak pole. Most guys would get rid of the ball as soon as possible. Either that or they'd just flee. It happened more than once that I heard the opposing coach yell, "You're going the wrong way!" Another moment of pride came when a dad on an opposing team started yelling that I was a headhunter. Damn right, I thought, and your son is next. Long story short, I was a rabid bull equipped with afterburners and armor plate. I was a sort of savant of demolition, but this hadn't always been the case. I'd actually picked up the skill in my early Pee-wee football days. I'd not always been a monster, of course. I remember very well the day I learned how to hit. I learned by being on the wrong end of an absolute flattening. It was my first year of Pee-wee football, and I'd never done any hitting as such in my entire life. If you've ever played Pee-wee football, you know that the first day of full contact is a pretty big deal. We had to do 2 weeks of drilling and practice without pads before the fateful day came, and we had run many sprints and lined up in formation many times in anticipation of the days we'd actually get to do some tackling. When the day finally came, we spent the early part of the practice with the same old running through plays and doing conditioning shit. I don't remember exactly what all we did, but I remember the actual hitting didn't come until the very end of practice. It was actually pretty sadistic now that I think about it. We were lined up in 2 long lines facing each other, creating a sort of long corridor between us about 5 yards wide. Then a person from opposite ends of each line would step out into the corridor, where they'd be faced off against each other with about 10 yards running room between them. One of them would be the ball carrier and one would be the tackler. The ball carrier had to stay within the corridor created by the 2 lines, so there was nothing to do really but run right at the other guy and try to bowl him over. Both guys got a running start, and they met in the middle. There were lots of kids like me who clearly didn't know what the hell they were doing. They would just sort of run at each other and hug at the other guy, half turning away before the moment of impact, not yet trusting in the pads to protect them, or maybe just terminally soft. There were a number of kids who knew what they were doing but didn't pursue the collision with any enthusiasm or gusto. They got behind their pads and sort of drove forward into the other guy, but there wasn't any malice, no ill intent. Just an attempt at good fundamental tackling. And then there was Shane. I didn't really know Shane because he went to a different school, but he had a reputation as a wild kid, and apparently that included being an absolute psychopath on the football field. Shane didn't run at you. He did his best to run through you. It was like the crown of his helmet was the business end of a battering ram, and his legs were a 1,000-horsepower engine that was only equipped with overdrive. There was no concern for his own well-being. Just a desire to run through and flatten whatever stood in front of him. Whoever was paired up with Shane was in for a thumping. That was just the way it was. Kids would switch their place in line to avoid being paired up with him, and they did it with no shame. Even the biggest kids wouldn't match their bulk against his savage ferocity. It was kind of like, you may be crazy enough to go against him, but I want to live. There was no shame in wanting to live, and Shane was a killer. I don't really remember my first time or two through the drill. I was probably matched up against someone equally clueless, and we ran at each other for a half-hearted collision before teetering to the ground. Then there was a murmuring as I neared the front of the line. The kid in front of me ducked out of line and moved a few spaces back. A few kids gave me furtive glances. I was oblivious to the fact that Shane the Juggernaut was looming, and I was lined up directly in his path. As I moved to the front of the line to take my turn, the team hushed. This was probably Shane's third time through the line, and I was the only one who hadn't clued into his danger. Everyone was ready for the show, looking at me like I was the sacrificial lamb. Shane cradled the ball. I ran forward like a tackling dummy, standing straight up, and Shane hit me like a missile, the crown of his helmet smashing into my chin and his shoulders planting directly in my numbers, his legs churning like they had no awareness there might be any obstacle in their path, like there was only digging at the earth and plowing forward. It was all I could do to wrap my arms around him as I was thrown backwards. I'm surprised I managed to keep my cleats on, much less my helmet. He crashed down on top of me. The entire team went, "Oh!" as one. Apparently mine had been the most thorough destruction yet, probably because I didn't have the sense to shy away or duck off at an angle as the impact came. Everyone was looking at me like I should be demoralized, but as far as I was concerned, I had made the tackle. The naivete reminds me of a lyric. Bid my past be borne away, beg to be born yesterday. Because wisdom is all well and good, but there's a lot to be said for the perpetual state of wonder that comes when the world is new. Before I blossomed into a lacrosse berserker, I had just been a weird, quiet kid who spent a lot of time daydreaming. I remember one time as a little kid the teacher had gotten upset with me because I had been doodling in the sand while she was making an announcement about recess. She punished me with 15 minutes of time out, saying, "If you like to doodle in the sand so much, here's 15 minutes of it." She was actually a sweet lady, but I think I was a difficult kid, a real space cadet. So she came back 15 minutes later and told me I was free to go play. I told her, that's okay, and that I was happy right where I was. She wasn't having any of this and shooed me over to a group of kids, instructing me to ask them if I could join their game. I approached them and made my inquiry. The kids said they were playing knights and I could be the Black Knight. Then they all ran away. I figured if this was playing, they could keep it. I went back to my daydreams, the primary of which was that the school was attacked by terrorist ninjas, and only I could stop them, with karate. At some point in my reverie I would be wounded and would have to retreat to the boiler room, where my wounds would be tended by the prettiest girl in the class, who had been the first one I'd rescued. I mean, duh. So my head was probably somewhere in the clouds while Shane was running me over. I certainly wasn't clued into the fact that there was a sort of alpha pecking order and I had just been smashed into the bottom of it. You might think I'd be given some credit for not shying away from Shane, even if it came as a result not of courage but of obliviousness. But I had earned my status as a whipping boy. Not only was I new to football, but I was one of the younger and smaller kids on the team. You see, the age limits ran at 2-year intervals, meaning all the 10 and 11-year-olds played together, all the 12 and 13-year-olds, etc. So one year you'd be one of the younger kids on the team, the next year you were one of the older kids. That year I was on the lower end of the age bracket, so I spent the whole year getting bashed around. I was one of the few kids that lived outside of town and went to a different school, so I didn't know any of the kids going in. Once I had been demolished by Shane, my generally quiet and aloof nature had me labeled as one of the team's punks. I was stuck on the offensive line, everyone's last choice, while I craved the chance at playing defense. Everyone wanted to play defense. I remember I made the mistake of complaining to my mom that I never got a chance to try defense, and her answer to this was to corner the coach after practice and give him a talk about giving me a chance. The coach was an alpha macho douche, so his answer was to punish me. Instead of making me run laps or something like that, he gave me what I asked for, putting me on the defensive line as a tackle. The only thing was that he took the 2 biggest and best athletes on the team and moved them to the offensive line for the day and lined them up across from me. I remember one of them was our fullback and one was our middle linebacker. They were both big and had hair on their upper lips and the beginnings of their man muscle coming in. I'd like to say I overcame them, but all I did was survive, and barely. Either one of them would have been able to push me around pretty easily, and the two of them together just manhandled me. I ended up leaving practice with a literal concussion. My eyes were dilated and I was squinting in the dusk with an aching head. The next day I was back on the offensive line and was greeted by a bunch of shitty smirks from those lucky enough to be chosen as defense. The coach gave me a big bully smile and asked me how I liked playing defense. I told him it was great and asked if I could do it again. This wasn't the answer he was expecting. He sent me back to the offensive line. I did get into the game a bit more after that, though, so maybe the coach decided his whipping boy could be more than just a target for his whip. For whatever reason, I decided to play again the next year, probably because I had the belief of the down and out that this time it was going to be different. A fresh start was going to allow me to reinvent myself. Plus, I'd hit a growth spurt, and this time I knew what I was doing, so I was determined to be the hammer and not the nail. I was the stud on the team that year, starting as middle linebacker and fullback, the positions of the two brutes that had once battered me into concussion. Then I broke my arm in the first game of the season, made a diving game-saving tackle after fighting off a handful of blockers, landed funny on my arm, and broke my left elbow. My parents wouldn't let me play football after that. It was incredibly disappointing. All that build-up and potential, the chance to really be a star, and suddenly it was gone. Fast forward a few years and I was moving to a new school, one that didn't happen to have a football team. There was a rumor that they'd once had a team, but some kid had broken his neck a number of years ago, and ever since then the team had been disbanded. Probably more likely, though, is that the school was a small private school that would have been stuck playing largely against bigger schools that would have reveled in getting a chance to sock it to the rich kids. Because that's what the school was mainly full of. There were a few scholarship kids, but they were few and far between. Mainly it was the children of doctors, lawyers, professors, and other professional types. We were the county's punching bag when it came to most other sports, but lacrosse was a definite exception. You see, we had this coach, a guy who was destined for greater things, probably is coaching at the college level now, but at the time he was about the best damned high school lacrosse coach in the nation. Not only did he know the game inside and out, having been an All-American player in college and a member of the national team, but he used charisma. The kids all loved him, including myself. He was always exhorting us to be the best, and with his help we were able to do so. He had turned the Durham Country Day Middle School into a sort of lacrosse farm system, starting a lacrosse club in the 5th grade that attracted all the best athletes in the school, and got them working on the fundamental skills necessary to later build the lacrosse juggernaut. The early start combined with the literally world-class instruction and drilling meant that by the time the kids reached high school, they were ready for prime time. Most of the kids we played against were picking up lacrosse sticks for the first time when they reached high school, so even throwing and catching were no sure thing, much less running intricate motion offenses with screens and decoys and the ball flying around as fast as 200 miles an hour. With opposing teams struggling to even get the ball down the field, we would usually win about 25-0. So when it came to Durham Country Day in the school pecking order, lacrosse was the only game in town. When you added in the access to weed, it was a no-brainer. There was also the fact that since lacrosse players wore helmets and pads, think football light, they had the illusion of being tough guys playing a contact sport. Except none of them really were tough guys. That was one thing that somehow couldn't be coached into them. Maybe the coach knew that if someone got hurt, he'd lose his dynasty. But for the most part, the DCD boys avoided the contact aspect at all costs. You see, lacrosse was kind of like hockey, in that there was the potential for bone-jarring impacts, but not on every play. And it certainly wasn't necessary to be successful, like in football, for example. Hitting was only allowed when a player had the ball or when the ball was on the ground within 5 feet of a player. Plus, there was kind of an unspoken agreement that in practice, the guys would go easy on each other. You didn't want to be injuring your teammates after all. So I usually would go easy in practice, which was no problem since I was only getting high before games. In games I was a monster though, which had an unexpectedly positive effect on the rest of the school. You see, I had been raised to be very anti-bully. That had been hammered into me at a young age. You didn't use your size to get your way, and especially not to belittle people. When I started at the school in the 9th grade, I had been tall but still pretty skinny. By my sophomore year, I had put on some man muscle and started to get a reputation for being someone you didn't want to mess with. Then when lacrosse season came around and I started demolishing kids, I assumed a sort of unspoken alpha position. So I decided to flex a bit and see if I could make the school a bully-free zone.